An arrow imbued with dark energy was fired with overwhelming speed, cutting through the air towards its target. The attack was focused and powerful, designed to annihilate the enemy. A green-haired archer channeled all of his energy into a single shot. He released the arrow with precision, confident in the power of his attack to end the fight. However, his opponent, a hooded figure, was not intimidated. The mage prepared his own spell, enveloping himself in a similar aura of power to defend or counterattack. The clash of energies resulted in a devastating explosion. The impact shook the battlefield, showing the magnitude of the power of the two combatants facing each other. Suddenly, a new and imposing presence emerged in the middle of the chaos. A heavily armed figure landed forcefully, interrupting the duel with their sudden arrival. The knight in golden armor raised his gigantic sword. He activated a finishing ability, intending to forcibly eliminate his target from the battlefield. The golden warrior unleashed his devastating blow. The blade descended like a mountain, carrying absolute power that seemed impossible for anyone to stop. However, to everyone's surprise, the overwhelming attack was stopped. A single hand held the blade, halting its advance with shocking and unexpected ease. The pressure exerted was so immense that the knight's sword began to crack. The weapon, which seemed indestructible, yielded to the crushing force of his opponent. A confident smile appeared on the face of the man who stopped the blow. He showed no effort at all, just cruel amusement at his opponent's impotence. The protagonist held the weapon firmly. With a mocking tone, he questioned his opponent's possession of power, as if he were taking it for himself. The Golden Knight watched, incredulous, as his body began to dematerialize. In his final moments, he expressed his shock at the monstrous power of his enemy. Rokan, the king of violence, revealed his identity. He mocked the idea that he could be defeated so easily, asserting his absolute superiority on the battlefield. Rokan's victory, however, was interrupted. A new opponent appeared, facing him with a serious and determined expression, ready to challenge him. Without hesitation, the newcomer, Skadi, launched his own attack. He manifested a powerful elemental energy, making it clear that the real confrontation was just beginning. A storm of energy and ice collided on the battlefield. One of the combatants was thrown back, completely overwhelmed by the force of the attack that hit him head-on. However, the blue-haired warrior withstood the blow with a mocking grin. He expressed his surprise, as if the opponent's power was disappointing. The enemy's fury reached its peak. Consumed by rage, he channeled a destructive energy, preparing for an even more violent attack. In response, the protagonist activated one of his abilities. He unleashed a war cry, a massive shockwave that expanded in all directions. The effect of the ability was instantaneous. All nearby enemies were immediately stunned, becoming completely vulnerable and unable to move. With his opponents paralyzed, the young man looked up with a wild grin. He confidently declared that he would exterminate each and every one of them. Suddenly, a new energy emerged. Golden lightning enveloped the protagonist, signaling the arrival of an unexpected and much more powerful threat. A bolt of pure energy descended from the heavens. The attack was massive and concentrated, with enough power to completely obliterate the location. The resulting explosion opened a huge crater in the ground. The force of the impact was so devastating that it seemed impossible for anything to have survived. However, amidst the dust, the protagonist rose. His expression was of pure determination, proving that not even that blow was able to defeat him. Looking ahead, the young man realized that he was no longer alone. Two imposing figures had emerged, their auras indicating an extraordinary level of power. One of the newcomers was revealed as Thor, the submaster of the Ragnarok Guild. His position as the fourth strongest lord confirmed the gravity of the situation. Even in the face of such a powerful figure, the protagonist showed no fear. On the contrary, a defiant smile formed on his face, ready for the fight. Meanwhile, Thor's companion, a man with a serene appearance, made a peaceful gesture. His calmness seemed out of place amidst the tension of the moment. Suddenly, the two powerful warriors disappeared. The protagonist was confused, looking at the empty space and questioning what had just happened. The blue-haired warrior felt an overwhelming presence. His expression, once confident, became tense as he realized the power that was manifesting before him. In the sky, Odin, the first in the ranking and master of the Ragnarok Guild, appeared. His divine aura and the spears of light around him heralded an unparalleled power. The warrior was shocked to recognize his opponent. The enemy's identity left him momentarily paralyzed, understanding the impossibility of that battle. Despite the fear, the blue-haired man prepared for combat. He steadied his weapon, refusing to yield, even before such a powerful adversary. Odin attacked without hesitation. He conjured a rain of light spears that descended from the heavens, aiming directly at the lone warrior below. The combatant tried to defend himself from the relentless bombardment. He spun his weapon, deflecting the energy projectiles, but the offensive was simply overwhelming. The warrior felt his movement slow down, an effect of Odin's attack. Frustration was visible on his face as he struggled to resist the debilitating power.
The torrent of attacks continued without respite. The battlefield was flooded with spears of light, completely subjugating the warrior and his allies. The extreme effort took its toll. Sweat ran down the man's face, a clear sign of his physical exhaustion in the face of the incessant pressure. From above, Odin watched the outcome with a cold and impassive gaze. For him, victory was just an inevitable conclusion. The warrior's body had finally reached its limit. With his vitality nearly depleted, he and his companions fell, defeated and incapacitated by Odin's power. With the battle over, Odin descended to the ground. He calmly walked across the devastated field until he stopped before his fallen opponent. Odin addressed the man on the ground with an air of superiority. His words carried the weight of victory, questioning the futility of his enemy's resistance. However, even defeated, the blue-haired warrior stared back defiantly. He gritted his teeth, his expression filled with anger and frustration. Odin seemed to reflect on the situation. He wondered how many times that same scenario had already repeated itself, suggesting that this defeat wasn't the first. An imposing figure in shining armor made a promise to the young man. He offered not only to restore everything that was lost, but to give him something even greater in exchange for his loyalty. The memory of that man was vivid. The knight's face, calm and confident, represented an opportunity for power and redemption that the protagonist once considered. However, another memory, much darker, surfaced in his mind. The image of a rival with a sadistic smile haunted him, a reminder of a bitter and painful conflict. The visions of the past mingled, culminating in a departure scene. He relived the moment he was left behind, a farewell that sealed his fate. Suddenly, the young man returned to reality. The virtual immersion pod opened, bringing him back from his memories to the solitude of his room. The protagonist sat on the edge of the equipment, the weight of those experiences still upon him. The harsh transition from the virtual world left him desolate and thoughtful. Anguish quickly overwhelmed him. The memories weren't just images, they were a burden that caused him deep pain and almost unbearable frustration.
Unable to contain his fury, the young man threw a violent punch at the floor. His powerlessness in the face of the past manifested in an act of pure despair. The noise of the impact echoed through the house. Downstairs, a man watching television looked up at the ceiling, alerted by the sound coming from the room above. After the fit of rage, only exhaustion remained. The protagonist sat on the floor, panting, his energy spent, but the emotional pain still intact. He tried to catch his breath, his face marked by effort and anguish. The experience in the virtual world left him completely drained, physically and mentally. For an instant, his reflection in the dark screen looked different. He saw the image of his other self, a reminder of the world he was forced to abandon. The memories of that place returned with force. A fantasy world, with a peaceful village under the glow of 2 moons. A home that was no longer his. That wasn't just a game, but a real and vast world. An entire planet, larger than Earth, that he once inhabited and was now out of his reach. More than the place, he remembered the people. The smiling faces of his companions were the most painful part of that longing, a reminder of everything he had lost. He was once the strongest in that world, a being of supreme power, sitting on the rubble of his enemies on a throne of his own creation.
The protagonist reveled in his unparalleled power, a confident warrior who knew no fear or defeat. However, he faced an opponent of absolute power, whose presence was cold and relentless, a direct contrast to his own impetuous nature. In the present, the young man reflected on the overwhelming strength of his enemy. The memory of that defeat still haunted him, reminding him of how he was overcome. He remembered being alone against an entire army, led by that divine being. The odds were 0, but he didn't back down. That memory didn't break him. Instead, it fueled his determination, driving his relentless training in the present. The protagonist was fighting for something he had lost. The image of loved ones was a constant reminder of what was at stake, and the reason for his fight. That memory awakened a deep fury. The pain of loss turned into a driving force, a fuel for his quest for power. He stood up, accepting the challenge. The young man decided that the battle wasn't over yet, and that he wouldn't give up until the end. The battle scene returned to his mind. His opponent advanced with his army, showing no hesitation in their attack. Refusing to back down, the warrior responded with the same ferocity. He charged against the enemy forces, ready to risk everything in a single confrontation. The man unleashed all his power in a last desperate effort, screaming in defiance against the overwhelming power of his opponent. However, his effort wasn't enough. The protagonist's body was pierced by countless spears of light, his resistance finally broken. From above, his enemy watched his fall.
The opponent's victory was absolute and incontestable, sealing the warrior's fate. Defeated and powerless, he felt the weight of his failure. In that moment, the strongest in the world had lost everything. A system notification hovered over the fallen young man. He stared at the rainy sky, his empty gaze reflecting the shock of the message he had just received.
The protagonist refused to accept it. In a scream of denial, he felt his body shatter under the system's penalty, but the physical pain was nothing compared to his agony. An imposing figure appeared before him, enveloped in an aura of power. The armored being coldly declared the young man's defeat, his gaze devoid of any emotion. Others joined the victor, watching with disdain. They judged him unworthy even of being killed, dismissing his existence as something worthless. In the sky, a sinister energy began to manifest. A final punishment was being prepared to completely erase the loser. A rain of light spears fell upon the protagonist. He remained still, accepting the overwhelming attack that awaited him. Despite the pain and humiliation, a hint of defiance remained in his expression. He wouldn't bow, even in the face of his imminent end. A vision of a different time emerged. A stronger, more confident version of himself smiled victoriously, a stark contrast to his current reality. The final impact arrived with a deafening sound. The energy consumed everything, marking the end of his desperate struggle. However, it was all just a nightmare. In a room lit by the morning light, the young man slept, unaware of the battle he was fighting in his mind. The shrill sound of an alarm clock brought him back to reality. The insistent noise broke the silence of the room. With a furious swipe, he silenced the alarm. The anger and frustration from the dream spilled over into the waking world. The protagonist sat up in bed, his head heavy with the memory of defeat. The feeling of helplessness from the nightmare still haunted him. He covered his face, cold sweat running down his skin. The humiliation felt so real that the young man could barely breathe. Instinctively, the man touched his neck, trembling. He checked to see if he was whole, the memory of pain and death still vivid in his mind. The protagonist woke up startled in his room. He got up, his mind focused on an urgent need. He needed to sell what he had left to get money. The young man's expression was one of pure determination. However, anxiety about his precarious situation was evident, and he knew he needed to act fast. He picked up a large bag, wondering about a collection request he might have made the day before. His memory seemed confused and fragmented. Suddenly, the protagonist's eyes shone with a golden light. A sudden realization hit him, leaving him stunned by the inexplicable change in himself.
The young man looked around the room, completely disoriented. That place, although familiar, seemed strange, and he couldn't understand where he was or what had happened. Beside him, on the floor, a cell phone with the screen lit caught his attention. Perhaps there was an answer to his growing confusion. Later, he found himself in front of a familiar place, the convenience store he used to frequent. Memories of his past life began to return.
The protagonist was paralyzed when he recognized not only the store, but also the employee who worked there. The reality of the situation began to weigh on him. Inside the store, he questioned the employee about the date, visibly disturbed. The blonde clerk was surprised by the sudden request and the anguish in his voice. The young man insisted, with a serious and urgent expression. He needed to confirm the truth, no matter how absurd it seemed to the other. A terrible memory struck him, the moment of his violent death. The pain and humiliation of that event returned with full force, bringing a cold sweat. Unable to process the truth, the protagonist fled the store in a panic, leaving the clerk completely confused behind. The blonde employee just sighed, not understanding the strange behavior of his acquaintance. The whole situation was bizarre and inexplicable. Meanwhile, the protagonist ran desperately through the busy streets of the city, the sound of horns echoing his internal confusion. The protagonist recalled a painful event from 3 years ago. The memory left him tense and shaken, bringing back a feeling he struggled to forget. In his mind, images of the sinister figures responsible for the trauma emerged. The smug smile of one of them, in particular, still haunted him with the memory of the cruelty of that day.
He relived the moment when a powerful figure was subdued by an overwhelming attack. The scene was quick and brutal, a massacre he couldn't prevent. That man's sacrifice was definitive, leaving only destruction and a bitter memory behind. The protagonist forced himself to relive every second of that loss. However, the young man decided to move away from that dark memory. He said goodbye to the past, determined not to allow it to control him anymore. With a confident smile, he turned to face a presence that manifested from the darkness of his memory. The protagonist showed no fear, only a defiant calm. The instant his hand touched his opponent's, an energy was released. the young man's face changed to one of pure determination, revealing his hidden power. The mental confrontation was quick and decisive. The entity from his memory was subdued, its power fading before the protagonist's strength.
Back in reality, the young man walked with firm steps down a busy street. He had won the internal battle and was now focusing on the present. His steps led him inside a building where he continued to walk with purpose. The transition from the mental world to the physical was complete. He took a deep breath, centering himself in the moment. It was a brief pause, a calm that preceded an unexpected and violent reaction. Suddenly, a pain or shock hit him with the force of a crack, making him scream. His reaction was so abrupt that it seemed to break something inside him. The protagonist's scream startled the people around him, who didn't understand the cause of his sudden outburst. He had lost control for an instant. The outburst passed as quickly as it began. Now silent, the young man processed what had just happened, the disturbance still visible on his face. An officer commented on the peculiarity of his friend's last name, unaware that those words had been the trigger. The mention of the name completely destabilized him. The blue-haired youth paused before a door, hesitant. He remained silent for a moment, contemplating what he was about to do, and gathering the courage needed for the next step. Apprehension was visible on his face. The boy was sweating, the tension of the moment becoming almost unbearable as he prepared to act. Cautiously, the protagonist peeked into the hallway. He needed to ensure no one would see him before putting his plan into action, his expression now focused and determined. Decided, the young man pressed his hands against the surface. It was time to act, using all his strength to create an unconventional entrance. With an explosion of force, he broke through the wall, surprising everyone. The onlookers reacted with shock and disbelief, not understanding what was happening.
Despite the blood on his face, a manic grin formed. The observers recoiled, terrified and confused by his attitude, questioning his sanity. All of this happened at the entrance of a gym. It was there that the young man intended to prove his worth, seeking a type of training that went beyond the ordinary. Inside, the protagonist unleashed his fury on a punching bag. Each blow was delivered with explosive force, as if he were fighting for his life.
His movements were a blur of violence and precision. He attacked the equipment with a speed and power that defied logic, determined to overcome his limits. The force of his own attack was so immense that it threw him against a window, shattering the glass. The other gym-goers watched, stunned by the scene. However, he didn't stop. The boy recovered and continued his relentless assault, each punch loaded with overwhelming energy and an unshakable will.
With a fierce look, he felt the realization of his effort. This wasn't ordinary training. It was the creation of his own fighting style, forged in pain. The memory of a humiliating defeat haunted him. He remembered when he was weak, a low-level warrior subdued by a much stronger enemy. That memory was his fuel. Now, however, his body responded to the intense training. He felt the strength flowing through his muscles, physical proof of his evolution and the power he had gained.
Before the completely destroyed punching bag, the protagonist smiled with satisfaction. The others around could only stare in amazement, witnessing the result of his madness. A young man gripped the iron bar with crushing strength. He prepared for another exercise, focusing all his determination on the physical challenge ahead. The protagonist forced his body to the limit, performing the squat with brutal weight. Each movement was a battle against exhaustion, a test of his endurance and willpower. Sweat streamed down his face, but his expression remained unwavering. The man ignored the physical pain, focused on a greater goal that drove him to continue. He felt an energy coursing through his muscles, visualizing his body strengthening to a fundamental level. His training transcended the physical. It was a cultivation of inner power. With a crash, the weight fell to the ground. The protagonist finally succumbed to exhaustion, completing his workout with one last monumental effort. Panting, a smile of satisfaction appeared on his lips. He remembered how he had retreated in the past, but now it was different. He was stronger. The image of a powerful lord on a battlefield invaded his mind. That figure, a pinnacle of power, was the reason for his obsession with strength. The intensity of the training caught the attention of another person in the gym. An onlooker watched, shocked by the aura of determination that the young man emanated. The face of that supreme being returned to his thoughts. His shining eyes represented a level of power that the protagonist desperately longed to reach one day. He felt small before the memory of that lord and his followers. They were adversaries of such a high caliber that they motivated him to overcome any limit. Later, in his room, a futuristic capsule awaited. That device was his bridge to the other world, the proving ground where his strength would be tested. The man lay down inside the machine. A technological helmet descended over his head, initiating the process of connecting to virtual reality. As the machine activated,
The protagonist's consciousness began to detach from the real world. He was ready for immersion. His eyes opened abruptly, now glowing with an intense blue light. He had arrived, and the energy he cultivated in the real world now manifested there. Before him, an energy portal swirled. The young man recognized the place immediately, declaring to himself that he had returned to the domain of his greatest adversary.
A voice echoed in the void, calling out a name as if it were a prayer or an order. In response, a man manifested, declaring his identity as Rokan. His divided form revealed the fusion of a fantasy warrior with a person from the modern world. The scene changed to a village consumed by flames. It was a memory of total destruction, the catalyst for the events that would follow.
Hordes of wild goblins advanced through the burning city, hunting the survivors. The cries of despair begged everyone to flee. In the midst of the chaos, a man was captured. He was defenseless on the ground as a goblin archer aimed to deliver the final blow. The arrow was fired, piercing the man's chest and ending his life brutally. Death was just another part of the carnage.
Back in the present, Rokan clenched his fist with a determined smile. Faced with a choice, he accepted his new path with conviction. However, confidence gave way to focused seriousness. The protagonist assessed the situation, preparing for the combat that was to come. A higher-level goblin emerged, running towards him with a club in hand. The creature was ready to crush his opponent.
With agility, Rokan dodged the powerful attack. The monster's blow missed its target and shattered the ground with the force of the impact. The warrior then demonstrated his superior strength by stopping the goblin's next attack with just one hand, firmly gripping the club. The monster was shocked and paralyzed with fear. He couldn't understand how his overwhelming power was contained so easily.
Rokan didn't give the enemy time to recover. The young man raised his own weapon, preparing a decisive counterattack. With a single downward strike, his blade cut through the air and split the goblin in half. The attack was clean and devastating. The force of the impact was so great that it shattered the ground around Rokan. He landed firmly, victorious in his first battle.
A powerful entity manifested amidst the destruction. With an arrogant smile, the being proclaimed himself the king of violence and demanded worship. As the village burned and its inhabitants fled in panic, the protagonist coldly analyzed the situation. He realized that this chaos was just the tutorial of a game. The young man crushed an opponent under his foot. He understood that, although the condition for winning was simple, there were more efficient ways to strengthen himself. With a final step, he sealed his victory. The system registered his action, recognizing that he had exceeded the initial expectations of the challenge. A system notification appeared, rewarding him for defeating a stronger enemy. He acquired the title of Natural Fighter, proof of his exceptional talent. The protagonist processed the new information. The mission was clear: avoid the goblins and simply escape the village. A task designed to be simple.
However, a confident smile appeared on his face. He knew the challenge was difficult for a newbie, but he had already proven to be far superior to one. The boy remembered an image of absolute power, a vision of a warrior triumphant over the remains of his enemies, the ideal of strength he aspired to. He also considered other paths to power, such as mastering arcane magic in dark and forgotten places. Strength had many forms. The protagonist watched the fire consume the village. Before him, there was a choice: follow the safe path, or create his own opportunity amidst the chaos. The horde of goblins advanced mercilessly, destroying everything. They were the obstacle the system expected players to simply avoid in order to survive. A mental map illustrated the most obvious and safe escape route, away from the main danger. The path to survival was clear and direct. However, a much more ambitious and dangerous idea began to form. The young man pondered what would happen if he ignored the escape route. A memory of someone from his past came to mind, a carefree figure who gave him advice that now seemed strangely relevant. The memory of that conversation strengthened his decision. The protagonist decided that he would not follow the rules, opting for a much riskier and more rewarding path. A memory of instruction flashed in his mind. The silhouette of a man demonstrated the correct way to perform an action, establishing a method to be followed. With a firm step, the blue-haired warrior advanced. He moved with a newfound determination, ready to apply what he had learned on the battlefield. The protagonist smiled confidently, wielding his weapon amidst the chaos. He already had a plan to deal with the situation and seemed eager to put it into practice. Meanwhile, a village burned under the attack of goblins. A young woman ran desperately to escape the creatures, which had already captured other villagers. Panic took over the woman. She fled with all her strength, fear etched on her face, as the sound of the monsters grew closer and closer. The goblins, with their wild screams, pursued their prey relentlessly. The creatures showed no intention of stopping until they reached their goal. From an elevated position, the warrior watched the scene unfold. He saw the woman in danger and the monsters chasing her, calculating the right moment to intervene. One of the creatures advanced, focused only on its victim. However, the goblin did not notice the figure preparing to jump directly into its path. With a quick and brutal movement, the protagonist landed in the middle of the horde. He immediately neutralized one of the goblins, interrupting the creature's advance with his impact. Another goblin turned, surprised by the sudden appearance. The creature did not expect such a direct attack, and was momentarily paralyzed by the warrior's audacity. The young man then unleashed his special ability. His axes spun in a whirlwind of steel, creating an area attack that was almost impossible to dodge. The surprised creature had no chance to react. The attack hit it head-on, and the goblin let out a scream of agony as it was annihilated by the devastating technique. The warrior finished his movement with a victorious smile. He had executed the blow perfectly, demonstrating total control over the situation and his own strength. A system notification confirmed his progress. There were a total of 25 targets to be eliminated, and he was just beginning his task. The protagonist stood over the body of his victim, catching his breath. One less enemy, but the mission was still far from over. A sinister figure reveled in the imminent defeat of his enemy. The warrior's smile promised only violence, a dark omen of what was to come for the goblin race. Amidst a burning village, a lone hero descended upon his enemies. He was the personification of retribution, leaving a trail of defeated goblins wherever he went. The monster's strategy was clear: a coordinated attack to surround and subdue their main target. The goblin leader commanded his troops, confident in their numerical superiority. After clearing the outside, the warrior reached his true objective. He stopped in front of the door, aware that the main threat awaited him inside, and prepared for the confrontation. The interior of the hideout seemed silent. The shelves of an abandoned tavern held secrets and perhaps resources that could turn the tide in favor of whoever found them. The protagonist struggled to breathe, his body exhausted after the battle. Each wound was a reminder of how close he came to death, feeling the weight of his recklessness. He looked at the fallen enemies and admitted to himself how dangerous his decision was. Facing 3 opponents at once almost cost him his life, a mistake he couldn't repeat. Realizing his critical state, the young man searched the shelves for a solution. His eyes found a potion, a last hope to continue the fight that wasn't over yet. Without hesitation, he drank the healing liquid. The warrior quickly consumed the potion, placing all his faith in the restorative power of that vial to save him from the brink of death. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. The potion's magic coursed through his body, closing wounds and restoring his strength. The protagonist felt his vitality fully return.
Fully recovered, the warrior stood up with renewed confidence. With his axe in hand, he was ready for any challenge that came next, stronger than before. However, a bestial roar echoed through the area. A much greater threat revealed itself, showing that the battle was far from over and the real danger had only just begun. The goblin leader finally appeared, his presence imposing and full of fury. Accompanied by his subordinates, the chief made it clear that he would not allow intrusion into his domain. The confrontation was inevitable. The protagonist found himself face to face with the monster, the air heavy with the tension of the battle that was about to begin between the two champions. Far from being intimidated, the warrior faced the goblin leader with a defiant smile. He raised his axe, accepting the challenge and preparing for the final combat with determination. An imposing goblin chief stared at the battlefield. His expression was one of pure fury and power, promising to annihilate anyone who opposed him. The giant creature led his horde. With a war cry, the monsters advanced in a wave of violence, ready to overwhelm their enemies by sheer number. Amidst the chaos, a young warrior was already in combat. He moved with precision, repelling the attacks of the smaller goblins with remarkable skill. However, one of the goblins observed the scene with unusual intelligence. The creature realized that the fighter was more than just a simple soldier. The protagonist then revealed his true strategy. He consumed 2 buff potions at once, deciding to use overwhelming power to end the fight quickly. With his newfound strength, the young man discarded the empty vials. He stood calmly before the goblin chief, completely unafraid of the size difference. The giant monster attacked with full force. His fist came down like a meteor, intending to crush the warrior in a single blow. However, the protagonist intercepted the attack with ease. The impact was immense, but the young warrior remained unmoved, demonstrating his superhuman strength. The goblin chief was stunned. His confidence turned to shock as he realized that his most powerful blow had no effect whatsoever against that human. The creature recoiled, confused and hurt. His opponent's unexpected resistance completely broke his battle momentum. The protagonist ignored the defeated leader and turned to the rest of the army. He challenged the remaining goblins, ready to finish them all off. In response, the horde advanced in a desperate attack. The creatures tried to avenge their chief, rushing towards the lone warrior. The young man moved among them like lightning. His movements, enhanced by the potions, were swift and lethal, taking down the monsters one by one. A last goblin attempted a surprise attack, advancing with ferocity. The creature believed it could catch the warrior off guard.
But the protagonist anticipated the move. With a precise and devastating axe strike, he ended the final threat, continuing his relentless onslaught. With a war cry, the protagonist unleashed a devastating blow. His determination was visible as he threw himself into the midst of combat, driven by a controlled fury and lethal precision. The young warrior swept the battlefield with his weapon. He cut through the enemy ranks with a single broad and powerful movement, demonstrating a strength that far surpassed that of his opponents. After the massacre, he paused for a moment to catch his breath. The protagonist looked at the ground, exhausted, but the tremor in his shoulders indicated that the adrenaline from the fight was still coursing through his body. However, his expression changed to one of analysis. The young man pondered the outcome of the battle, evaluating his own performance and the unfolding of events with a calculating gaze. A system notification appeared before him, confirming his success. He had achieved an impeccable victory against a large number of enemies who were, individually, stronger than him. He smiled as he read the details of the reward. The protagonist discovered that he was the first to conquer that title, which granted him a significant increase in his strength and dexterity attributes. His confidence grew as he analyzed his new stats. Even at a low level, his attributes were already impressive, and the newly acquired bonus made him even more formidable for future challenges. Memories of the battle came to mind. He recalled how he faced the horde of goblins that advanced relentlessly towards him, a challenge that seemed impossible for a single warrior. The protagonist tightened his grip on his weapon. He braced himself for the impact, concentrating all his strength for the imminent confrontation against the wave of monsters approaching.
With speed and precision, he began to decimate the enemies. Each blow of his weapon found its target, knocking down the goblins one after another in a display of pure martial skill. The massacre continued without respite. The young man gave the monsters no chance to react, moving like a whirlwind of destruction amidst the chaos of battle.
He stood firm as the bodies of the enemies were thrown through the air. The force of his attacks was such that the goblins were violently repelled with each impact. Suddenly, a new threat emerged from above. More enemies fell upon him, and the protagonist found himself surrounded on all sides, the situation becoming increasingly dangerous. He turned and faced a much larger enemy, an elite goblin with a heavy weapon in hand, prepared to crush him, representing the greatest danger he had faced so far. The creature delivered a crushing blow. The attack came down with brutal force, intending to annihilate the protagonist once and for all. Testing his limits to the fullest, a powerful attack incinerated the monster, granting the fighter a level up. The battle seemed to be progressing smoothly, with enemies being eliminated one by one. The hooded warrior grinned fiercely, holding his axe firmly. He reveled in the violence of combat, ready for the next kill. Without hesitation, he continued his advance, piercing another goblin with a swift and lethal blow. The creature had no chance to react to the relentless attack. The fighter expressed his disdain for the weakness of his opponents. To him, it didn't matter how many came, as their strength was insignificant. However, an unexpected blow forced him to defend. The youth blocked the attack with his shoulder, feeling the force of the impact, but refusing to back down. Suddenly, a much larger and more imposing goblin emerged. Its arrival unleashed a wave of power that shook the battlefield, announcing a real threat. The force of the giant monster's impact cracked the ground, demonstrating a level of power completely different from the previous goblins. The situation changed drastically. One of his companions was thrown away by the shockwave. Caught off guard, the light-haired fighter couldn't maintain his balance against the overwhelming force. Meanwhile, the hooded warrior continued his slaughter, focused on the smaller enemies. With a sadistic smile, he felled another creature with a brutal swing of his axe. His attack was accurate, cutting down the enemy in a fluid and devastating motion. The fighter was completely immersed in the battle, oblivious to the greater danger. The impact of the blow resonated, confirming the death of another monster beneath his blade. The carnage continued without pause. Noticing an opportunity, the man in tattered clothes attacked the giant goblin from behind. He aimed for a vital point, hoping to take down the great threat with a surprise blow. His attack connected with precision, creating an explosion of energy at the point of impact. The attack seemed to have been successful. The blow managed to cut the monster's ear. It was a visible wound, but perhaps not as incapacitating as the attacker had hoped. However, the giant goblin only turned slowly. Its furious gaze and intact body revealed that the blow had only served to enrage it further. Amidst the battle, the protagonist endured the pain with determination. His eyes glowed with power, revealing that, despite being wounded, his will to fight remained unwavering. In a sudden movement, he grabbed the green creature's face.
The youth decided to use the opponent's brute strength against itself, initiating a direct and merciless counterattack. The monster roared in pain as the protagonist's power hit it squarely. The attack was focused and devastating, destabilizing the creature for a crucial moment in the fight. With tremendous effort, he hurled his adversary to the ground. The force of the impact was so great that it shattered the rocks, demonstrating the fighter's surprising strength. However, the protagonist did not escape unscathed and received a powerful blow in return. A system notification confirmed the damage, and he gritted his teeth to endure the intense pain. Fallen on the ground, the youth looked up in surprise to see the monster's foot about to crush him. He found himself in a position of extreme vulnerability, forced to react quickly. He managed to block the stomp with his arms, resisting the crushing weight. The impact generated a shockwave, but his defense remained firm, proving his incredible resilience. Meanwhile, from a higher point, a mysterious warrior watched the fight unfold. He remained motionless, carefully analyzing each movement of the fighters below. The observer's gaze was serious and calculating. His expression did not reveal his intentions, leaving a doubt in the air about whether he was an ally or a new enemy waiting his turn. Using a dark skill, the protagonist forcefully repelled the creature. He took the opportunity to create distance and reposition himself, gaining a brief moment to breathe. Standing again, the youth prepared for the next confrontation. He adjusted his stance, showing that the previous attacks were not enough to shake his fighting spirit. With a defiant smile, he taunted his opponent. The protagonist demonstrated complete confidence, inciting the monster to continue the fight as if he were enjoying the challenge. The youth's attitude seemed to intimidate a smaller goblin watching from a distance. The creature recoiled, visibly frightened by the aura of power emanating from the fighter. Unexpectedly, another man who was there decided to flee, running away from the battle. The larger green monster watched the scene, seemingly not understanding the sudden retreat. The creature was completely confused by the sudden flight. Its perplexed expression indicated that it could not understand why its target had simply abandoned the combat. A monstrous creature unleashed a roar of pure fury. Its eyes glowed with murderous intent, revealing the imminent threat it posed to anyone in its path, amidst the fire and destruction. The creature advanced mercilessly on its victim. The attack was so swift and brutal that the person barely had time to react, only screaming in despair as they were subdued by the monster's overwhelming force. Amidst the destruction, a masked figure remained standing. The individual seemed to have survived the chaos, observing the result of the violence with a disturbing calm, as if analyzing the situation. Suddenly, the silhouette of an imposing warrior emerged from the smoke. The fighter seemed to have been caught off guard, alerted by an unexpected sound or movement on the battlefield. The orc warrior, wielding his massive axe, turned his attention to a nearby structure. He seemed to have found his next target, or perhaps a new enemy, amidst the scene of devastation. A cruel smile formed on the creature's face. The monster clearly took pleasure in the destruction and was confident in its power, anticipating the coming confrontation with satisfaction. Fallen, the blue-haired youth assessed his situation. Despite being wounded, his expression showed determination. He questioned himself about using a crucial item, pondering if it was the right moment to risk it. He decided to act. The youth firmly held a scroll that emanated a magical aura, preparing to use the artifact that could turn the tide in his favor at that critical moment. The scroll was activated, releasing its power. A system notification confirmed the use of a fire resistance item, a strategic preparation for what was to come. With the power of the scroll active, the youth's confidence increased. He smiled, prepared to face the imminent danger, feeling strengthened by the new magical protection that enveloped him. The giant creature approached, growling menacingly at the fallen youth. The size difference was overwhelming, but the boy showed no fear in the face of the monster's intimidating presence. Ignoring the danger, the young man waved provocatively at the monster. He tried to anger his opponent with a gesture of defiance, showing a boldness that bordered on recklessness. The taunt worked. Enraged, the monster delivered a devastating blow with its axe. The attack cut through the air with tremendous force, leaving a trail of golden energy. The impact of the blow was immense, releasing a wave of power that seemed capable of pulverizing anything in its path. The golden energy completely filled the vision, showing the magnitude of the attack. The axe hit its target with full force. The young man and his companions were violently thrown back by the impact of the blast, feeling the full power of the monster's attack. Cornered, the young man realized that there was not enough space to dodge the impending attack. He braced himself for the impact with an expression of pure determination, accepting that the collision was inevitable. The green creature delivered a devastating and swift blow. The massive attack engulfed the protagonist in a flash of energy, giving him no chance to escape or counterattack. The force of the impact was immense, sweeping through the environment and launching debris throughout the room. The pure energy of the blow demonstrated the monster's overwhelming power. Thrown violently, the young man's body collided against the wall. He screamed in pain as he felt the impact that shattered the concrete structure behind him.
Fallen and severely injured, the protagonist received a notification from the system. The damage he suffered was critical, and his vitality dropped to a dangerously low level. However, while the young man was incapacitated, a dark presence began to manifest. A sinister silhouette armed with two blades emerged from the rubble with a threatening sound.
A new surge of power erupted from within the young man. He let out a furious cry, not of pain, but of pure rage and determination, channeling an overwhelming energy. With this new power, he hurled his weapon. The spear cut through the air with incredible speed, leaving a trail of red energy towards its target. The surprise attack hit the monster head-on. The creature had no time to react to the swift projectile, which struck it with precision and force, catching it off guard. Despite his injuries, the protagonist stood up, displaying a defiant smile. In a sarcastic tone, he questioned the creature, showing that the fight was not over yet. The monster took a few steps back, surprised by its opponent's resilience. The young man, although exhausted and leaning against the wall, kept his gaze fixed and provocative. Annoyed by the challenge, the creature responded with full force. It spun and hurled its gigantic weapon, aiming directly at the incapacitated protagonist on the other side of the room. The axe lodged in the pillar inches from the young man's head. It was a clear warning, a demonstration of power that almost proved fatal. Far from being intimidated, the young man responded with a gesture of pure contempt. His smile widened as he taunted the monster, showing that he felt no fear.
Taking advantage of the creature's distraction, the protagonist executed his plan. He quickly moved towards a window, beginning his escape while his enemy watched, stunned. With overwhelming force, the structure collapsed on the armed goblin. The creature was caught by surprise, unable to react to the sudden and devastating attack. In seconds, the monster was completely buried by the rubble. The battle ended abruptly and violently, leaving only a pile of stones behind.
Meanwhile, the protagonist jumped away, narrowly escaping the collapse he had provoked. It was a desperate maneuver to ensure victory. He landed with an annoyed expression, frustrated at having been forced into such a brutal and exhausting fight. A system notification confirmed his victory, but also alerted him to his critically low vitality. The protagonist realized that the victory almost cost him his life. At that moment, a memory assaulted him. He remembered a man named Odin, silently cursing him for the ordeal he was facing. Fury and exhaustion overwhelmed him for an instant. The young man grabbed his head, feeling the weight of the battle and that bitter memory. Suddenly, a new notification surprised him. The system announced that he had completed the tutorial, a fact that left him momentarily perplexed.
The protagonist looked back at the destruction he had caused, beginning to process what his feat really meant. The system rewarded him with a title for defeating much stronger opponents. Upon seeing that he was the first to achieve such a feat, a smile of satisfaction appeared on his face. Soon after, another message congratulated him on an impossible achievement. His joy exploded as he received a second exclusive title for completing the tutorial perfectly.
The rewards for completion were then detailed, including basic items and mystery chests. He assessed his gains with a calculating look. His face darkened into a sinister smile. With the new titles and rewards, the protagonist felt a dark confidence about what he would do next. The dust from the battle began to settle, leaving a scene of complete devastation as a witness to the fight for survival that had just taken place. The young man remained with his back turned, contemplating the horizon. The tutorial was over, but he knew that his true journey was just beginning. A young man with blue hair reacted with total disbelief. Upon examining the system screen, his initial surprise quickly turned into pure euphoria. He remained focused on the glowing screen, absorbing every detail of the information. What was before him seemed too good to be true. Joy took over the protagonist. He could hardly believe his luck, a satisfied smile dominating his face as he processed the reward. The system confirmed that he had obtained a legendary title, the first to conquer it. Its effects promised to facilitate his relationships and accelerate his training significantly. With a confident gesture, the man interacted with the screen. He understood the immense power he had just acquired and felt ready for the next steps.
The intensity of that moment was palpable. The sweat on his face revealed not nervousness, but the adrenaline of having achieved such overwhelming power. Satisfied with his new title, he continued to explore his rewards. There was more to discover, and the young man wasted no time in proceeding. Facing the chests he had won, the protagonist prepared for the next stage. With determination, he decided to open all his prizes at once. A pillar of blue light erupted in the center of a city, marking his arrival. The locals stopped, surprised by the sudden appearance. As he materialized, he observed the surroundings with familiarity. The man reflected on how much time had passed since his last visit to that place. The protagonist looked up at the sky, absorbing the city's atmosphere. That return awakened in him a feeling of nostalgia and belonging. Suddenly, a hand stroked his head in a casual gesture. The young man whistled, seeming amused by the interaction, as if he expected it. His attention turned to a group of imposing figures who were waiting for him. Their appearance made it clear that they were not ordinary citizens, but warriors. The protagonist immediately associated them with the Ragnarok Guild. He remembered the leader of that group and his followers, recognizing them as old adversaries. The young man's relaxed expression disappeared. His face became serious and determined, as he understood that a confrontation with his rivals was inevitable. The blue-haired youth listened to the story with disdain, letting out a sigh of disinterest. He didn't seem impressed with the tales of glory from the past. The narrative described a time when a legendary figure floated amidst a torrent of power, receiving the adoration of his followers. The leader of that era possessed an imposing gaze, a presence that exuded absolute authority and unquestionable power. It was a time when dozens of the greatest warriors swore loyalty to him, uniting under his command and acknowledging his strength. However, the protagonist internally mocked the appearance of those supposed heroes, considering their attire ridiculous. He pondered for a moment, reflecting on the weight of those stories and what they meant for the present. Annoyed with his own thoughts, the young man kicked a stone. He decided it was better to forget about it for now. However, a new determination arose on his face. He couldn't simply ignore what he was feeling. The protagonist then walked with renewed purpose, advancing towards a new objective. Suddenly, he stopped. Something ahead caught his attention and made him freeze in place. A muscular man confronted him, challenging him to approach. In the background, other warriors trained intensely.
An old master watched the scene with a stern look, evaluating the interaction between the two. The young man analyzed the situation, considering the instructor's challenge and the environment around him. The sound of training echoed through the courtyard, with the others striving to their maximum against the training dummies. Firmly, the protagonist addressed the muscular man. He expressed his desire to use the training field. An old instructor offered a meager reward for a simple task, seeming quite pleased with the proposal. He presented the mission with an air of benevolence. The protagonist, however, reacted with surprise. The simplicity of the task and the small reward left him momentarily confused. In the training yard, several recruits practiced against combat mannequins. The activity seemed monotonous and repetitive for most of those present. However, the young man threw himself into the work with unexpected fervor. He attacked the mannequin with a determined smile, channeling all his energy into the exercise. His fist collided with the target, unleashing a powerful impact. The blow demonstrated a commitment that the others did not share. Meanwhile, the other participants, like a skilled swordswoman, considered the task excessively easy. She performed it without any effort or interest.
Frustration grew among the others. Two of them complained openly, feeling that they were wasting time with useless training and suggested going to hunt monsters. The protagonist ignored the complaints around him. He continued to strike the mannequin with unwavering fury and persistence, focused only on his own effort. Exhausted and panting from the effort, he received a notification from the system. His strength had increased by 1 point. Upon seeing the message, the young man realized something fundamental. That small gain was proof that the method, however tedious, worked. A wave of satisfaction washed over the protagonist. He smiled, confirming to himself that his hard work was finally paying off. As a reward for completing the tutorial task, the system granted him a simple barley bread. The young man sat on the ground to eat his reward. He recovered his energies in silence, away from the others.
With a new, determined look, he understood the path forward. The protagonist had discovered a secret to power that everyone else despised. In a flashback, a young man with blue hair moved with impressive speed. He channeled his strength into a devastating blow against an opponent, demonstrating his combat skill. After the effort, the fighter recomposed himself. He prepared to continue, announcing with determination that it was time to get back to hard work. Without wasting time, the man delivered a powerful punch against a training dummy. The force of the blow was immense, focused on destroying its target. The impact was overwhelming. The training equipment couldn't withstand the force of the attack and shattered completely, flying into pieces. Meanwhile, two men watched the scene. One of them commented with disdain, questioning the need for so much display of strength from the young man.
The protagonist, however, ignored the comments and remained focused. His concentration was total, dedicating himself entirely to his exhausting training. He prepared another attack. With a quick and powerful movement, the fighter launched his fist once more, demonstrating his improved technique. The stone target exploded on impact. The demonstration of raw power proved that his rigorous training was generating extraordinary results. Exhausted, the young man fell to his knees amidst the wreckage. A system notification confirmed that he had maximized all of his possible physical attributes in that location. The system recognized his tireless dedication. For his extreme effort, he received the title of Hard Worker, proof of his perseverance. Another achievement was announced, declaring him the strongest man in the village. The notification surprised one of the men watching him, who reacted with astonishment. Suddenly, a mysterious figure approached. The man asked a direct question, wanting to know if the young man wished to become even stronger. The figure revealed himself to be a muscular and intimidating being. His presence was threatening, and his posture indicated that he was a challenge of a completely different level. The protagonist was stunned by the sudden appearance. His expression was one of pure surprise as he faced the new and imposing figure before him.
An older, more muscular man offered the young man a unique opportunity. He proposed to show him a path to greater power, inviting him to follow him. The protagonist was surprised by the unexpected proposal, pondering the offer that could change his destiny. After accepting, the young man followed his new guide through a dark cave. The older man illuminated the path with a lantern, leading him into the unknown. As they walked, the mentor began to explain the challenge. He described an opponent that moved with the precision of a human, something the young man watched carefully. The warning, however, was severe. The older man explained that the test was lethal, especially for someone of his level, and that he would only have a single chance. Despite the danger and the anger he still felt, the protagonist smiled. The idea of such a risky challenge excited him deeply. They arrived at a training chamber. Inside, a single combat automaton was positioned, waiting in silence. Impulsively, the young man punched the older man in the face, a release of the frustration he still harbored. The blow had no effect. The mentor remained impassive as the large door to the arena opened, revealing what was to come. To the young man's surprise, there wasn't just one, but a whole group of combat automatons in ready position.
With a serious look, the older man continued his explanation, detailing the relentless nature of the training that awaited him. The explanation ended. The protagonist stood before the entrance to the arena, facing the monumental challenge he had accepted. A wave of adrenaline washed over the young man. He cracked his knuckles with an excited smile, ready for the fight. Without hesitation, the protagonist advanced, crossing the threshold and officially entering the dangerous training arena. Alone in the vast room, he watched the automatons activate. The army of mannequins rose in unison, prepared for combat. The young man narrowly dodged an energy beam. The training mannequin attacked without hesitation, forcing the fighter to react at maximum speed to survive the test. With a furious shout, the young man channeled his energy into a clenched fist. He decided to stop just defending and finally counterattack with full force. The fighter propelled his body upwards. He prepared to deliver a devastating blow from above, using the momentum to maximize the impact of his skill. Upon landing, a shockwave exploded from him. The technique annihilated multiple mannequins at once, clearing the area around him with brutal efficiency. However, a more formidable opponent fixed its gaze on the young man. The test was not over yet. A greater challenge had just been activated and was ready to attack. The new enemy struck him with overwhelming force. The impact launched the fighter violently backward, showing the immense difference in power between them. His arm was captured and began to disintegrate under the crushing pressure. The young man felt a sharp pain, realizing that he was completely immobilized and in real danger. He looked at his trapped arm and the other mannequins surrounding him. The situation seemed hopeless, with no apparent escape route against so many opponents.
However, a confident smile appeared on his face. The protagonist activated an escape skill, dematerializing just in time to avoid the enemy's final blow. The young man reappeared at a safe distance, verbally confirming that the test had been successfully completed. The training mannequins ceased their attacks immediately. With the test completed, the path to the next area was revealed. An imposing metal door sealed the entrance to a deeper chamber in the cave. The door was reinforced with steel plates and thick bolts. Its construction suggested that it wasn't made to be opened easily, but rather to contain something powerful. Near the door, the remains of a special mannequin lay on the ground. It held an energy sphere, the likely key mechanism needed to unlock the passage. Suddenly, the massive metal door was violently broken open from the inside. Whatever was sealed in there was powerful enough to destroy its own containment. A dark silhouette with a single bright red eye emerged from the wreckage. The new presence questioned something, revealing that the real challenge was just beginning. The young man with blue hair displayed a wild grin. His eyes gleamed with the satisfaction of a newly won victory. Feeling the power he had just obtained, he watched the system notification floating in front of him. The warrior expressed surprise that he had finally managed to obtain that title in such a challenging place. A memory of a formidable warrior flashed in his mind. The young man gritted his teeth, remembering the strength that inspired or challenged him to get there. In a flashback of the battle, he moved with speed and fury. It was through this brutal combat
that the protagonist managed to prove his worth and earn his new position. With a confident smile, he decided that the moment to act had arrived. Gaining the title was just the beginning of his true plan. The scene changed to a bustling city. The architecture suggested a center of power or an important guild. The next destination on his journey. The focus shifted to a specific building, a place that appeared to be the training center for warriors, or the headquarters of a combat class. Inside the place, a robust, hooded man slept soundly. His posture and physique indicated that he was a high-level instructor or guard.
The man was abruptly awakened by a loud noise. He got up, annoyed by the interruption, ready to confront whoever had disturbed him. The bearded instructor stared at the newcomer with a stern look. He assessed the young man who had dared to disturb his rest. The young man with blue hair, however, responded with a confident smile. He showed no fear, only the certainty of his purpose there.
The initial tension dissipated into laughter. The older man recognized the young man's spirit and enthusiastically advised him on the path he should take. The instructor picked up a seal, making a final decision. He declared that he understood the young man's intention and was ready to formalize it. With tremendous force, he slammed the seal onto the table. The impact was so powerful that it cracked the surface, symbolizing the importance of that choice.
An aura of power enveloped the young man. A system message confirmed his class change to Berserker, and he smiled, exultant with his new identity. A veteran warrior clenched his fist, determined to test the limits of his opponent. His expression was one of pure confidence in his own strength. The young man accepted the challenge. A notification confirmed that his level would be reset, but his attributes would remain, a condition he faced with a fierce grin.
In front of an arsenal, the muscular man watched with an air of superiority. He awaited his opponent's choice, amused by the situation. The protagonist's hand moved purposefully, choosing a heavy, double-bladed axe from among the options. The decision was quick and definitive. Holding the weapon, a menacing aura enveloped the young man. His focus was total, preparing to demonstrate his true power in the combat that was about to begin.
Without wasting time, he advanced with a powerful spinning strike. The warrior put all his strength into the first attack, testing the opponent's defenses. The veteran observed the initial movement, his expression of disdain giving way to slight surprise. He seemed to reassess the young man in front of him. The protagonist unleashed a sequence of relentless attacks. He moved with a speed and brutality that pressured the more experienced warrior. The attack culminated in a devastating blow that launched the young man himself into the air, breaking the ceiling with the impact of his strength. The muscular man looked up, genuinely impressed. He expressed his admiration for the protagonist's display of overwhelming power. The young warrior smiled with satisfaction. He was clearly enjoying the opportunity to fight without restrictions, feeling invigorated by the challenge.
His mind, however, wandered for a moment. He remembered other formidable adversaries and allies he had encountered on his journey. However, he recalled that none of them compared to the armies he faced alone. The young man remembered his solitude on the battlefield. A memory of a desperate fight surfaced. He saw himself surrounded by countless enemies, forced to unleash an overwhelming energy to survive. The memory of that primal fury and the fight against all odds strengthened his resolve in the present. This test was just another obstacle. An imposing figure, armed with an axe, emerged from the light. His silhouette promised overwhelming power, marking the beginning of a new chapter for the warrior. Rokan revealed a wild, battle-hungry grin. The excitement of a new challenge shone in his eyes, showing his true warrior nature. The protagonist positioned himself with unquestionable authority. His presence was overwhelming, and he observed the environment with the confidence of someone who had already won. Suddenly, his expression changed. Rokan focused on a system screen that appeared before him, analyzing the information with seriousness. A new mission was revealed, to seek the traces of an ancient entity called Wild Wind. The task was linked to his recent class change, suggesting a greater destiny. Before the system window, the young warrior accepted his new purpose. He was ready to follow the path presented to him without hesitation. Later, at an establishment, Rokan made a bold demand to an employee. He introduced himself as a berserker and requested the maximum loan amount. The place seemed to be a financial institution or a guild, a place where power and money met, and new journeys could be funded. His attitude caught the attention of another man, who confronted him with sarcasm. The stranger seemed to doubt Rokan's ability to afford such an amount. Meanwhile, Rokan accessed the information about his new skills. The first icon represented his mastery with the axe, the foundation of his power. The system continued to display his talents, showing icons that symbolized his enhanced combat and movement capabilities. A devastating attack skill was presented, illustrating the brute strength he could now unleash on his enemies. Rokan analyzed the description of the Berserk skill. He pondered the power that came with sacrificing his own sanity in exchange for overwhelming strength. With his decision made, the protagonist turned, ignoring the reaction of the man who had questioned him. He had a new path to follow and would waste no time. The protagonist confronted a robust man, who reacted with surprise and disdain. The young man's expression, however, indicated that he had a serious purpose and would not be dissuaded. The scene expanded to a public square where a crowd gathered. A hooded observer watched from afar, keeping focus on the center of the commotion, where the protagonist was. Sitting, the young man pondered a name he heard. The moniker Wild Wind echoed in his mind, and he tried to understand its meaning and why it was associated with him. An uncomfortable memory came to his mind, bringing an expression of annoyance to his face. He recalled a specific moment that led him to the current situation. He relived the frustration of a previous battle. Despite his determination, he remembered a moment when he felt powerless, unable to act as he wished. The memory of his powerlessness propelled him in the present. With a shout of effort, he demonstrated his strength, surprising the spectators around him with the feat. That moment of overcoming solidified his resolve. The protagonist decided that he would no longer be limited by his weaknesses and that he would seek power at all costs. He had reached a new level, a class change. Now, his only goal was to evolve quickly, accumulating power relentlessly so he would never feel weak again. A confident and somewhat dangerous smile formed on his lips. The young man was ready to embrace his new path no matter the challenges ahead. Later, he sat casually, waiting. The protagonist made a public offer, seeking a knight for a specific task in exchange for a reward. Suddenly, something caught his attention. The young man turned his head, realizing that someone had finally taken an interest in his unusual advertisement and was approaching. A gauntlet of polished armor entered his field of vision. The quality of the equipment indicated that an experienced knight had answered his call. A burly warrior stood before him with a smug grin. The man seemed amused by the proposal and expressed his interest in accepting the job. The protagonist assessed him with a calm and calculating gaze. He was not intimidated by the knight's imposing presence, maintaining his composure. The knight questioned the young man's ability, openly underestimating him. In response, the protagonist only smiled, hiding his true strength behind a calm facade. The blue-haired young man was thrown to the ground. He raised his hand in a defensive gesture, surprised by the aggressiveness of his opponent's attack. The robust man grabbed him by the collar, his expression full of fury. He reprimanded the young man severely, clearly dissatisfied with his attitude. Still on the ground, the protagonist caught his breath for a moment. He prepared for the next action of his adversary, who warned him to stop pretending. Suddenly, the robust man felt a sharp and paralyzing pain. A thin blade pierced him from behind, to the shock of the spectators watching the scene. Ignoring the injury, the knight channeled a dark energy into his hand. He prepared a magical counterattack, his eyes glowing with a sinister power. In response, the blue-haired young man activated his own skill. The aura of a level 1 berserker began to envelop him, changing the course of the battle. A transformation took over the protagonist. A wild smile appeared on his face as the newly awakened power coursed through his body with intensity. His opponent, however, reacted with pure mockery. The robust man laughed openly at the young man's display of power, completely underestimating him. The protagonist stood up, feeling the strength flow through his muscles. He expressed his surprise at the low level of his new berserker skill. The young man's confidence deeply irritated the knight. His laughter turned into a grimace of pure fury and contempt. The protagonist's transformation was complete. His hair turned white and his eyes glowed with a golden light, revealing a new and dangerous intensity. Faced with that overwhelming power, the robust man screamed. His previous arrogance disappeared, replaced by shock and obvious fear. The young berserker smiled disdainfully. He mocked the opponent's surprise, questioning if he really thought level 1 would be weak. The knight, now at a clear disadvantage, expressed his disbelief and anger. He could not accept the sudden and humiliating turnaround of the battle. The scene then revealed the beginning of the conflict. The blue-haired young man proposed the duel, establishing the prize of 15 silver coins for the winner. A blue-haired man confronted a larger opponent with a mocking smile. The tension between the two was evident, with the larger man responding with a contained fury, grinding his teeth in clear irritation. The blue-haired youth, Baikal, snapped his fingers with an air of superiority. His smile widened, revealing an unwavering confidence and a genuine pleasure in provoking his adversary. Without hesitation, Baikal activated one of his skills. An aura of power enveloped him, signaling that he was ready to transform the taunting into real and immediate combat. A system notification appeared for the knight in armor. Baikal had formally requested a duel, wagering 15 silver coins on his own victory, making the confrontation official. The armored man reacted with disbelief and anger at the audacious proposal.
To be publicly challenged for such a specific amount was a direct insult to his honor and strength. Baikal, however, only broadened his taunting smile. His opponent's fury did not intimidate him. On the contrary, it seemed to amuse him immensely. The challenger's expression was one of pure arrogance. He savored the moment, completely sure of the outcome of the duel he himself had initiated. Meanwhile, a new group of players arrived at the scene. Led by a man in a red cloak, they walked with purpose, drawing the attention of everyone around.
The crowd began to murmur at the arrival of the newcomers. The group's imposing presence indicated that they were not ordinary players, and their appearance changed the atmosphere of the square. The leader of the group observed the scene with a serious expression, while the sorceress beside him seemed surprised by what she saw. They assessed the situation of the impending duel. Baikal maintained his smug smile, aware of the new eyes on him. The extra attention only fueled his ego and his determination to put on a show. The square became an improvised arena. Baikal waited in the center, while the crowd, including the challenged knight, prepared to watch the confrontation. The knight accepted the challenge. He firmly gripped his halberd, the gleam of the metal reflecting his decision to respond to the provocation with brute force. With a furious cry, the armored man advanced, raising his weapon to deliver a crushing blow upon Baikal. He intended to end the fight quickly. However, in the middle of the attack, the knight stopped abruptly. A sudden realization hit him, and his angry expression turned to shock as he noticed something unexpected. The protagonist provoked his opponent with a gesture of defiance. With a confident smile, he questioned the true nature of the enemy's weapon, demonstrating a complete lack of fear. The elite goblin reacted to the taunt with a gnashing of teeth. Rage grew behind his menacing smile, preparing to crush the insolence of the youth. With a powerful leap, the creature descended from the skies. The goblin charged with all its weight and strength, determined to end the combat with a single, crushing blow. However, the protagonist stood firm. He endured the devastating impact of the attack, which shattered the ground around him, but failed to break his defensive stance. The elite goblin observed his adversary with a mixture of surprise and amusement. The youth's unexpected resistance only increased the creature's enjoyment of the battle. Suddenly, the protagonist burst into a swift movement. He became a blur, moving faster than the eye could follow to prepare his counterattack. The speed transformed into a precise attack. The youth channeled all his momentum into a downward strike, seeking an opening in the enemy's armor. The two combatants clashed in a furious exchange of blows. The battle became a duel of reflexes and speed, where every move could be the last. Amidst the chaos, the protagonist remained calm. A new determination arose in his gaze, indicating that he was about to turn the tide of the fight in his favor. A dark and sinister aura emanated from the youth. His violent persona came to the fore, revealing a hidden power and a thirst for battle that would surprise his opponent. The elite goblin felt the change in the atmosphere and was furious at his opponent's arrogance. He couldn't believe the audacity of that human. With a single punch, the protagonist delivered a devastating blow. All his strength focused on the goblin's helmet, breaking his posture and his confidence. The impact broke not only the metal, but also some kind of energy barrier. Blue fragments scattered through the air, revealing a completely unexpected result. The protagonist himself was surprised by what happened. He didn't expect his attack to have that peculiar effect. Questioning what he had just done, the youth's fist remained clenched. The blow had been successfully delivered, but the mystery behind the bluish energy left a new question on the battlefield. The protagonist came across a training room filled with automatons. One of them activated, fixing its bright gaze on the youth as a target to be eliminated. With a confident smile, the protagonist prepared for the confrontation. He channeled his energy, determined to show the result of his training and his overwhelming strength. With a single swift movement, he advanced and delivered a devastating blow. The automaton had no chance being completely destroyed by the fulminating impact. The adventurers who watched the scene were dumbfounded. The demonstration of power was so sudden and overwhelming that they could barely process what had happened. One of the spectators, in particular, was paralyzed by fear. The strength displayed by the protagonist was on a level he had never imagined possible. The memory of a previous confrontation surfaced. The protagonist held a man by the neck, who struggled in panic, completely subjugated by his strength. The youth tightened his grip without any hesitation. His cold and determined expression left no doubt about the inevitable outcome of that clash. Then, he delivered a brutal and decisive punch. The violence of the blow was so great that it sealed his opponent's fate mercilessly. The man fell defeated, his body dissolving into data. The protagonist remained standing, victorious and imposing over the remains of his enemy. In another moment, a man screamed in pain, with his head stuck inside a wall. He was then questioned about his plans to go to the orc camp. After defeating his opponent, the protagonist remarked about obtaining a reward. He walked away indifferently, leaving the immobilized man behind. Two men watched the protagonist and his group walk away. Impressed by what they saw, They decided to make a proposal for a dangerous mission. One of the men, assessing the protagonist, clenched his fist. Before committing, he needed to know the young warrior's power level. The protagonist intercepted the man's gesture with ease, displaying a superior smile. The surprised man revealed his level and that of his companions. Realizing the enormous power gap, the man changed his offer. Instead of forming a group, he proposed that they only serve as guides to the camp entrance. A young man with blue hair watched the group of adventurers with a calculating look, assessing the situation before making his move. Meanwhile, the protagonist and his companions presented themselves as an imposing and confident group, ready for any mission that arose. The boy then approached the protagonist with a peculiar and somewhat humiliating proposal: to be carried to an orc camp in exchange for silver. The hero's allies reacted in opposite ways to the young man's audacity. One seemed amused by the situation, while the other remained completely indifferent. The proposer continued to argue, and the protagonist, overcoming his initial surprise, seemed to find humor in the boy's confidence. The blue-haired youth kept his gaze steady, determined to get what he wanted, without showing any doubt about his plan. After a brief discussion, the protagonist seemed to make a decision, communicating his plan to his companions, who reacted with surprise.
An agreement was finally sealed, but not in the expected way. A bag of money was handed over, reversing the roles of the negotiation. The blue-haired boy accepted the payment with a smug smile, satisfied to have manipulated the situation to his advantage. Later, the group traveled through the forest. While their protagonist and his allies advanced cautiously, their new client followed them in a totally relaxed manner.
Suddenly, the leader stopped, sensing a nearby threat. His companions went on alert, but the client only showed irritation at the sudden stop. They had arrived at their destination, the imposing entrance to an orc camp, a place that exuded danger. Hidden among the trees, the group observed the enemy fortress. The protagonist began to devise an infiltration strategy. The client, however, displayed a slight smile. The sight of the dangerous camp did not seem to intimidate him in the slightest. The protagonist made an abrupt signal for everyone to stop. Something unexpected caught his attention, leaving his companions confused by the reaction. The protagonist acted quickly, throwing something towards the forest with a swift and precise movement. His gaze was focused, demonstrating total concentration on the task. The meat bait landed with a dull thud on the forest floor. The sound broke the silence, serving as a call to any creature that was nearby.
It didn't take long for the target to respond. Two imposing creatures with green skin emerged from the woods, walking towards the piece of meat that was offered to them. The creatures, however, did not advance blindly. They stopped to observe their surroundings suspiciously, assessing the situation with unexpected caution. One of the orcs growled softly, sniffing the air. His instincts alerted him to a danger that was not yet visible, but that could already be felt in the environment.
The pair remained hesitant in the face of the easy meal. They carefully inspected the area, aware that this could be a well-laid trap. Hidden in the vegetation, the protagonist watched the scene. He realized that the bait wasn't his and questioned who else might be operating in that same area. The young man then signaled to his team. He decided that the best thing to do was to retreat discreetly, avoiding a confrontation with whoever had set that trap. However, the retreat was not silent enough. The creatures noticed the group's movement and reacted with fury, feeling threatened by their presence. From a different vantage point, a blue-haired man smiled disdainfully. He expressed that the situation had become more interesting than he expected. The protagonist and his group hid again, now observing the other team that revealed itself. It became clear that they had stumbled upon another team's hunting plan.
Everyone's expression was one of surprise and caution. The presence of another group of adventurers completely changed the dynamics of the mission and introduced a new element of danger. The group then came across the true objective, a fortified orc camp. The scale of the threat was much greater than they had imagined. An imposing and well-armed guard patrolled the entrance to the camp. His presence made it clear that any attempt to invade would be met with lethal force. Hidden, the team members analyzed the enemy fortress. The protagonist led the observation, while the blue-haired man, right behind, seemed impatient with their hesitation. The protagonist prepared for the confrontation, with his gaze fixed on the danger ahead. Behind him, his sorceress companion began to chant a support spell, ready to assist him in the approaching battle.
The sorceress channeled her mana, uttering the words of power. Magical energy accumulated in her staff, enveloping her in an arcane glow as she finalized the spell to strengthen her ally. The spell enveloped the warrior, who felt the power coursing through his body. With his eyes shining with a new energy, he felt more than ready for what was to come. Their target was an elite orc, an imposing and brutal creature. The monster growled as it noticed the presence of intruders in its territory, preparing to crush them without hesitation. Driven by magic, the protagonist advanced with impressive speed. He became a blur of red and silver, charging directly at the monster before it could even react. Caught by surprise, the orc roared in fury as he identified the invaders. However, before he could attack, magic runes pinned him in place, an arcane trap set by the sorceress. The warrior struck in the blink of an eye, his blade cutting through the air. The orc tried to shout a command, but realized too late that his voice had been silenced by the spell. He didn't stop, moving nimbly through the forest. The young man leapt over his enemies, eliminating the orc minions with precision and speed, cutting a path through the chaos of battle. After the fight, the protagonist found a peculiar item among the spoils. The star-shaped object glowed with a soft light, indicating its magical nature and its importance to the mission. Later, he found an informant who pointed him to a secret passage. The blue-haired man explained that this was the path that led directly into the orc camp. As a reward for a completed task, the informant handed the warrior a heavy bag of coins. The payment was made, and the next phase of the mission was about to begin. The man then said goodbye to his companion in a paternalistic way, warning the protagonist's group about the greater dangers that awaited them. The journey would become much riskier from that point on. The group turned to leave, following the instructions. The informant insisted that they hurry, but the protagonist just smiled, confident in his abilities to handle any threat. As they walked, the sorceress approached the cleric and whispered something to her. The young woman in white reacted with surprise, while the sorceress wore a mischievous smile, amused by the situation. The protagonist stopped and looked back, interrupting their conversation. His two companions stared at him, confused by his sudden interruption and curious about what he had noticed. The sorceress narrated a dark event from the past. Her serious expression indicated the gravity of the situation she was describing to the group. The protagonist listened in silence, absorbing the story. The tension in the air increased as he processed the woman's words. Her story brought up the image of wild and brutal orcs. They were formidable enemies, driven by an uncontrollable rage. However, a lone warrior faced them. He fought bravely against the horde, leaving a trail of defeated enemies behind. The story then shifted to a more sinister memory. An imposing knight with an aura of pure evil launched a devastating attack. This figure became a shadow of overwhelming power. His presence was so terrifying that it paralyzed his victims with fear. The dark being seemed to grow stronger with each confrontation, absorbing the experience of his battles as if following the rules of a cruel game. The sorceress and her companion, the cleric, watched the protagonist's reaction. They seemed surprised or worried about what he would do next. The young man, however, showed a defiant calm. He rejected their concern. His determined expression revealed that he was not intimidated. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the area. A new presence was approaching with unwavering confidence. From the shadows, a silhouette with a malevolent smile revealed itself. The aura emanating from it was one of pure arrogance and power. A blue-haired warrior appeared, with a giant hammer resting on his shoulder. His confident smile made it clear that he was looking for a challenge. The protagonist took a deep breath, concentrating. He assessed the new opponent who had just arrived, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. The newcomer shouted, questioning the honor of everyone present. His voice echoed with a direct and provocative challenge. He then positioned himself as a champion of a different code, perhaps that of the orcs. The warrior prepared for battle. Surrounded by shadowy figures, the protagonist smiled with overwhelming confidence. He felt not fear, but a pure and intense excitement in the face of the power that emanated and the challenge that approached. The young man recalled the arduous battles that had brought him there. He faced formidable enemies in violent combats, overcoming each one with relentless determination.
He then revealed that his motives were much greater than a simple fight. The protagonist had a clear and ambitious purpose, a specific reason for seeking these dangerous confrontations. His goal was to accomplish feats considered almost impossible. The young man aimed to conquer legendary-level titles as a reward for his victories, solidifying his power and status. That place was the ideal hunting ground for his plans. Each duel won guaranteed valuable rewards, turning each monster into an opportunity to become even stronger. However, a new challenger suddenly appeared. With an arrogant look, the red-marked men questioned the opponent's identity, underestimating who was standing before him.